Let's go live to Washington now to speak to former US Deputy Envoy Ellie Cohanim. Ellie, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me. What did you think when you first heard the Trump administration had blocked Harvard from enrolling new international students?
Well, I was really very happy of all the steps that the Trump administration is taking to deal with the anti-Semitism and, frankly, anti-Americanism that's going on at Harvard University and many of our elite institutions here in the United States. In particular, regarding the foreign students, what we know is that Harvard University has something like 27% of their overall university enrollment is foreign students. And the facts that we've seen is that many of those students are the most radical. They're the ones who are participating in this pro-Hamas movement across the country, and of course at Harvard in particular. They have targeted Jewish students and have caused harassment and assault on Jewish students. And Harvard has chosen to fight the Trump administration instead of fighting the anti-Semitism on their campus. They are the ones who are escalating. They could just comply with the demands of the Trump administration. They're refusing to do so. And I think that this case is going to go through the U.S. court system. It'll probably eventually wind up at the Supreme Court. My belief is that it's going to be Harvard that will lose this case.
Ellie, actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, because it still has some way to go through the courts. And we also have been hearing that a judge has temporarily blocked Donald Trump's want to stop enrolling international students. What exactly does this mean, and where does this leave Donald Trump right now and the administration when it comes to Harvard?
Well, a temporary injunction, what that does is that it kind of puts a temporary hold on the Trump administration's ability to actually take away Harvard's ability to issue they don't issue the student visa, but to be able to permit foreign students to enroll at Harvard. So basically what's happening right this moment is that the situation is on hold. But for long term, I just don't believe that Harvard is going to win this, because the ability to allow international, whether it's students or nationals, into the country belongs to the federal government. And the federal government ultimately decides who they do and don't want to allow into the country. So Harvard has a lot of resources. And again, what's appalling, I think, for us to see right now is that instead of Harvard trying to partner with the White House and this administration and figure out how are they going to resolve their anti-Semitism problem, how are they going to resolve the issue that there are radicals on their campus. And I want to bring something else to your attention. The United States Congress actually has just notified Harvard that they also are investigating Harvard University's ties to the Chinese Communist Party, some work that they're doing together that leads back to China's human rights abuses, as well as some work with the Iranian regime. So Harvard has a lot of troubling ties and troubling decisions that they're making right now. And really the onus is on them. They have decided to fight the Trump administration instead of fighting anti-Semitism on their campus, and it's really a shame on them.
Ellie, I just want to move on to another story quickly. President Trump's much touted big, beautiful bill has narrowly squeaked through the House. How big of a deal is this for the Trump administration?
It's a really big deal because the president was elected with a real mandate from the majority of voters in the country to get through his agenda, his campaign promises. And in order to do that, he really needed the U.S. Congress to fund his priorities and also cut places where he wanted cut, where he'd promised the American people that he would do budget cuts. So the big, beautiful bill, as he has so brilliantly marketed, did pass, as you mentioned, the House by a very slim numbers. And now it's going to be up to the United States Senate to get this bill through the Senate so that it will wind up at his desk and he can vote it into law. And we're confident that the Senate will pass it. I think that there were some changes that were made along the way. And so at this point, it would be incredibly unpopular for the United States Senate to try to come up against the Trump administration and truly the mandate that the administration, the president has been given by the American people.
And Ellie, 2 Israeli embassy staffers were killed in what's been called a hate-motivated attack in Washington, D.C. How concerned are you about rising anti-Semitic violence in the U.S.? We're just talking about Harvard. And what should the response actually be?
Well, this attack outside of the a Jewish institution is being investigated as a terror attack. And we've seen Judge Jeanine Pirro, who is prosecuting the case, say that she might even be seeking the capital punishment for the attack. And so I think that should bring some comfort to Jewish Americans and Americans as a whole. But yes, the statistics of rising anti-Semitism in this country are very troubling. And, you know, I would point to figures in the United Nations as an example who spread this blood libel just this week, claiming that 14,000 babies in Gaza were going to starve in the next 48 hours due to Israeli actions. Of course, this libel spread through international media, through the BBC and into American media as well. Before the UN and the BBC and others retracted it, millions of people had already bought into the lie. And so this is how radicalization takes place. If somebody like an Elias Rodriguez, who traveled all the way from Chicago to Washington, D.C. to execute in cold blood these 2 Israeli embassy staffers. And so, you know, I point my finger at the United Nations. I point my finger at the university leaders, again, who are failing us in the fight against anti-Semitism. And I frankly also point my finger at the previous Biden administration that allowed a pro-Hamas movement to sweep through American cities for 15 months without pushing back hard enough. And so now the Trump administration and authorities have to clean up the damage that was done for almost 2 years before they came into office.
Former US Deputy Envoy Ellie Cohanim, thank you for joining me on the show. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me on.